Welcome to the June 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. We have 4 discussion items on our agenda today with 2 items under committee report. With a full agenda, I would ask for a focus with each discussion to allow us to get through the entire agenda. If any participants have issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator, Ray. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusions of all presentations and any public comments. Finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. No one has signed up for public comment today. Additionally, there are no items for consent today. So we will move to election of officers. The Planning Commission has 3 officers that serve specific roles. Each summer we hold elections for these 3 positions. The officers serve for 1 year and can serve consecutive terms. Today, we need to conduct elections for the chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. The chairperson presides over the Planning Commission meetings. Currently, I am in that role, completing the appointment of the last chairperson, Chair Tomasulo. The vice chairperson presides over Committee of the Whole and serves in the absence of the chairperson. The secretary maintains the official records of the Planning Commission, though these duties are usually given to staff. We will vote on each position separately. After nominations, we will vote by a show of hands. So I will start by asking for a nomination for chairperson. Commissioner McIntosh?
I nominate Roberta Fox for chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntosh. Commissioner McIntosh has nominated myself, Commissioner Fox, to serve as the chairperson. I will ask for a show of hands from all those who support the nomination. And any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And now I will ask for a nomination for vice chairperson. I would like to offer a nomination for Commissioner Mann. And I see approval of that. So I have nominated Commissioner Mann to serve as the vice chairperson. I will ask for a show of hands from all those who support the nomination. And any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Now I will ask for a nomination for secretary. And Commissioner Bennett?
I nominate Commissioner McIntosh.
Excellent. And I see a nod there as well. Commissioner Bennett has nominated Commissioner McIntosh to serve as secretary. I will ask for a show of hands for all those who support the nomination. And any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you. And then does the secretary wish to have staff maintain the official records?
Yes, I will be happy for staff to maintain the official records. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, on to the committee report. The Transportation Committee and the Committee of the Whole each met on May 27th and discussed 2 rezoning requests. We will discuss each one separately. The first one, Z6720, was discussed by the Transportation Committee. It's a request to rezone approximately 4 acres of land from residential 4 to office mixed use, 3 stories, parking limited, conditional use. The committee referred the item back to the Planning Commission without a recommendation. The applicant indicated that new and revised conditions are being contemplated. For us to continue review, we will need to request a 60-day time extension. We are not voting on the final disposition of the case today. We are only asking for additional time with the expectation that the request will be discussed at our June 22nd meeting. I would ask if the Transportation Committee Chairperson, Commissioner Bennett, has any additional comment.
No, Chair Fox, that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. I would like to ask for a motion to request a 60-day time extension for Z6720. Commissioner Bennett?
I move that we request a 60-day time extension for Z6720.
Commissioner Bennett has offered a motion for the time extension. Do we have a second? I see Commissioner Rains.
I second.
Because this is not a final vote, I'll ask for a show of hands for all of those who support the motion. And any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Z321. This item was discussed by the Committee of the Whole. Case Z321 is a request to rezone approximately 0.18 acres of land from conservation management to residential 6. The committee reviewed this request and recommends approval, stating the request was consistent with the comprehensive plan and surrounding development. Additionally, the committee suggests that the City Council may wish to examine the zoning in this area, as several of the lots developed with single-family structures also have conservation management zoning currently. This zoning district is extremely limiting, and changes to these existing structures and the properties may be problematic in the future. With that, I would ask for a motion, and any motion would need to cite comprehensive plan consistency. Commissioner Rains?
Thanks, Chair Fox. I move to recommend approval of the rezoning case Z321 and the subsequent change to the future land use map from conservation management to R4. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest because it is supported by these specific policies in the comprehensive plan. Policy LU 8.5, conservation of single-family neighborhoods. Policy LU 8.12, infill compatibility, and policy H 1.8, zoning for housing.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Rains has offered a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner O'Haver?
Second.
Commissioner Rains has offered a motion. Commissioner O'Haver has seconded. I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes. At the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Good morning. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Elder?
Aye.
Chair Fox?
Aye.
Middle Vice Chair Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh? I'm sorry. Commissioner Lappman?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Commissioner Rains?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Moving to old business, there's one item listed under old business portion of the agenda today. This request was previously discussed at the May 25th Planning Commission agenda, where the item was deferred to allow the applicant to offer revised conditions. Item F.1, case number TCZ 121 or Z1521. This is a request to modify the zoning conditions for approximately 1.3 acres of land that is currently zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories conditional use. The property is located on North Blunt Street and Delway Street. This request was discussed at our last meeting where we received a staff presentation, an applicant presentation, and heard from members of the public. I'd like to ask for a brief update from staff focusing on changes to the application since our last discussion.
Good morning. As was mentioned, you last heard this item Z1521 TCZ121 at your last meeting on May 25th. Since then, the applicant has revised the zoning conditions. Go to the next slide. I think this may be the old presentation. Hold on a moment. Great, apologize for that delay. So these next slides show the a summary of the requested changes to the existing conditions. The underlined portions are what has changed since your last meeting. So you see here the pieces that remain the same, removal of a handful of commercial uses so that they're now permitted on the site, removal of reference to unity of development plans, public plaza requirements, and some additional requirements for those new commercial uses. Next slide. So a few small changes, one to the requirements for the commercial uses. In addition to the evergreen trees that are required in that landscaped area, those would now need to be at least 10 feet in height when they're planted. And in addition to the solid wood fence along the southern portion of 206 Delway, requirement for plantings there as well. Next slide. And then a few other additions. One is requirement for a solid wood fence that is on the eastern boundary of 206 Delway to be installed for at least 100 feet of that boundary. A limitation on the height of string lights to no higher than 12 feet. And a prohibition on wood burning fires that are not located in the existing masonry fireplace or a similar structure. And the language defines that as one that has a chimney that extends at least 4 feet above the firebox and at least 10 feet off of the ground. So that's the summary of the changes to this case since your last meeting. These changes did not change the consistency with the comprehensive plan, which I can go over if that's helpful, but otherwise I can close the staff comments and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Ruckow. At this point, I'd like to move on to hear from the applicant if members of the commission are interested. We've already heard from the applicant and members of the public. By show of hands, would the commissioners like to hear an update from the applicant and allow additional comment from persons signed up to speak? Okay. Based on the raised hand vote, we will grant some additional time. We will grant 4 minutes to each side. So first, I'd like to hear from Isabel Maddox representing the applicant. The applicant, again, has a total of 4 minutes to speak.
Good morning, planning commissioners, and welcome to new Commissioner Elder. This is Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. Here today with John Holmes, President of Hobby Properties, and David Brown, Landscape Architect with Klein Design. This text change is simply trying to allow folks to take their coffee from Yellow Dog, their ice cream from Three Roosters, or food and beverage from Standard Food, and sit outside in the back. And go to Exhibit 1, the next slide, please. You can see we've delineated this small 50 by 55 foot area as the village green. It's a very small part of this property. And you also see where these various restaurants are located in the shopping center that abuts this property, which is not part of the zoning case. It's just relevant in that the restaurants that will be served by this village green area are in that shopping center. And then Exhibit 2 summarizes the proposed new conditions. New and some includes some old. The operating hours are the same at 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. We're providing a landscape buffer along the east and north lines of the village green, including a 7.5 foot solid wood fence, evergreen trees, which will be 10 feet at planting, which is a pretty substantial tree. And then we've also added a solid wood fence to go up towards Dell Way, almost all the way. We wanted to stop that fence at the front corner of Mr. Karchner's house. And importantly, we have agreed to remove the ground level fire pit and require that all fires on this site be in the raised fireplace with the chimney, which we think will help with the smoke dissemination. So for next slide, you can see a graphic illustration of that. The orange lines are where the new fence will be required. So we have a fence on the both north and east sides of this area. The red little square is the existing masonry fireplace. And then the green represents the 10-foot at planting trees that will be planted there. And these trees are expected to grow up to maybe 25 or 30 feet at maturity. Next slide. To summarize, we think it's important that, the commission recognize this block is already mixed use zoning. It includes a shopping center, which abuts the residential already. So the fires are permitted now. Without this text change, fires are permitted on this property in the existing zoning. And they're also permitted in single family residential, just like they could be in anybody's backyard of a recreational fire. Buffer plantings will be substantial, 10 feet of installation, expected to grow to 25 to 30 feet. And we think this facilitates a neighborhood scale use of a small outdoor space. We believe our conditions address the smoke, the hours of operations, and provide substantial screening, and we would request your support. Thank you. And I'd like to reserve any available time for rebuttal.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Maddox. There are 2 people signed up to speak in opposition to this request. Each person would have a total of 2 minutes to speak. Ray, can you please introduce the first speaker?
Yeah, I think the first speaker will be Ballantre Hume.
Good morning. I just have 2 or 3 questions. I'd like to point out that lot is the same on my side. It drops a foot from our level of property. So if you're doing only 7.5 foot fence, you can drop it down to 6.5. And you've got 12 foot height in patio lights, and there must be 12 strings. I don't see where that would really be a lot of help. It would be better if they would do like an 8 foot fence and drop the lights, because even if an 8 foot fence is going to be 7 from our viewpoint. That's it.
All right, thank you. The next speaker is Cameron Karchner.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Ray, did we lose the speaker?
Hello?
Yeah, he should be good now. Yeah.
Everyone can hear?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Ms. Maddox, for your past consideration in this matter. We're directly adjacent to the property in question. And at the last meeting, am I to understand that the fence line is going to go along all of the whole line of 20628 property line? Is that what that illustration showed just a moment ago with the orange line?
I'll let staff answer that question when you're complete with your comments.
All right. In addition to the considerations that you all have already given, we'd like to ask that we limit the number of persons on the property, and 7 a.m. seems a bit early. 7 to 10 p.m. is the hours of operation that are being suggested. We might suggest something along the lines of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We would also like to request that there be no amplified sound on that parcel, because in the past they have had bingo or trivia night over there with speakers as tall as I am, and I'm 6 foot. So we're a little concerned about that, but we certainly appreciate the consideration that you all have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. I'd now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Maybe if we could start off with having either staff or the applicant clarify the extent of the fence on the eastern property boundary.
Sure, I can clarify this. This is Hannah Reckow. The language has been offered would require a fence to be located at least 100 feet of that boundary. So that's a significant portion of the boundary there.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments for other staff or the applicants? Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I'm just curious, given the questions that the last caller had, is the applicant willing to consider having no amplified sound? Or is that something, are these the conditions are these their final conditions?
Before we get the applicant to answer that, I would also like to get some clarity from staff about rules related to amplified entertainment. So I believe there's something in the code currently.
Just checking on this is amplified entertainment is regulated through a permit process, but it's not, I don't believe, part of the UDO. It's a different section of the city ordinance. So off the top of my head, I don't know if David York is familiar with that process, but I believe it is akin to like getting a special use permit to have amplified outdoor entertainment.
It's been a while since I've seen one go through the process, but the last time I did, it was a special use permit issued by the city council. I don't know if it's still a special use permit, but it's a city council approval. And I believe it still involves a public hearing. But, I can double check and get back with you on that.
And we'll go to the applicant if you'd like to answer Commissioner Bennett's question.
Yeah, I believe I'm consistent with Mr. York's comments. I haven't done one in a while. I have done it before, and it does require a public hearing historically. So that's another hurdle to go through. We don't have any plans to incorporate amplified sound here. It's just a place for people to sit. And in answer to the question about 9 a.m., well, one of the things we want to accommodate is people getting their coffee in the morning. So 9 a.m. is a little bit too late for that. But I don't think that crowd's going to be very noisy or boisterous. I think people go out there and just have a coffee outside. It's going to be fairly quiet. So at this point, we don't really want to amend our conditions again because of the delay that would cause. And I do think the neighbors, should we go for an outdoor amplified entertainment permit, we would have to go through a public hearing process.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett, did I see a follow-up question?
Yes. So the caller seemed to indicate that there already is amplified sound. So am I understanding that that is correct and they're using amplified sound without the special use permit that they're supposed to have? I'm just trying to get clarity around it because I can understand the concern about having loud sound at 10 o'clock at night if you're an adjacent residential neighbor. So I'm just trying to get some clarity around, the caller said that there has been amplified sound. So should the owner have a special use permit if they're going to do that in the future?
I would respond that I'm not positive about what has gone on in the past, but there's no intent going forward to have outdoor amplified sound.
So I can speak to this. This is John Holmes. I can speak to the issue that was brought up about the bingo. That was a neighborhood run club that utilized that space without actually getting the correct permit. They've been prevented from doing that in the future, and they should have actually gone through the correct process. But we've prevented them from doing that since they did it, and it was again without our knowledge. So I do apologize for that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to, having found the section of the city code that deals with an outdoor amplified entertainment. So to have amplified entertainment indoors is a separate permitting process, but for an outdoor amplified permit, it is a special use permit application that is heard by the Raleigh City Council at a quasi-judicial hearing. And there are some findings that the council has to make. They look at the establishment's proximity to residential areas, schools, churches, and healthcare facilities, the establishment's history of compliance with noise and nuisance laws, access with respect to pedestrian automotive safety and traffic flow emergency service, intensity, including such considerations as size, location, hours, or conditions, landscaping, screening, and fencing, control of elimination of noise, et cetera, and that it will not adversely impact public services and facilities. So those are the general findings. There can be limitations on hours of operation, and I believe that the duration of the permit is something that will be set by the city council. So hopefully that is helpful in terms of understanding how those permits are applied for and obtained. Like David and Ms. Maddox, I have not seen one of these in a long time. The last one I can remember was issued to Sadlax. Of course, Sadlax has not been in existence for a number of years.
Thank you for that, Ken. Do we have any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, seeing no other comment, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner O'Haver?
Yes, I move to recommend approval of rezoning case Z1521. I believe the applicant has, with the revised rezoning conditions, taken consideration and action for the screening and the buffers of the adjacent properties, including the fencing, the taller planting, the reduction of the lighting of height, the height of the lighting. Let's see. The rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest and is supported by the specific policies in the comprehensive plan. Policy LU 1.2, future land use and zoning consistency. Policy LU 1.3, conditional use district consistency. Policy LU 5.2, managing commercial development impacts. LU 10.3,
ancillary retail uses, policy LU 5.1, reinforcing the urban pattern. And I'd like to thank Director Bowers for throwing a shout out to SADLAX.
And Commissioner O'Haver has offered a motion, and I see Commissioner Lampman.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner O'Haver and a second by Commissioner Lampman. I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes, and at the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome of the vote.
Chair Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Elder.
Aye.
Chair Fox.
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Mann.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver.
Aye.
Commissioner Raines.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to new business. There are 3 items listed under new business portion of the agenda today. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, and we will hear a full presentation and an applicant presentation. First item, case number Z5820. This is a request to rezone approximately 50 acres of land from agricultural productive with special highway overlay district 1 to residential mixed use 3 stories conditional use. The SHOD 1 overlay would remain. I would like to ask for a staff presentation from Don Belk.
Good morning, Chair Fox, members of the Planning Commission. This rezoning request is located at 7425 Buffalo Road. It is a request to rezone 50.43 acres. Presently, the site is within agricultural productive zoning with the Special Highway Overlay District 1. Your deadline for action is August 9th. Next slide, please. Beyond the AP zoning, the zoning to the north is primarily R4. Note the mixed-use districts to the south of the site. This site does lie alongside I-540 to the west. Next slide. An aerial view showing this site that is located both north and south of Buffalo Road. This site is almost completely wooded today. There is an electrical substation, 1 single-family residence, and some agricultural activity still present on the site. And a zoomed out view of the site showing the Buffalo Road I-540 interchange. Some street perspectives along Buffalo Road, as well as William and Mary Drive, which borders the northern leg of the proposed site on the east. Another perspective from Landover Ridge Drive. Landover is a single-family residential neighborhood north of the northern portion of this site. Next slide. And this shows the intersection of both William and Mary Road, and it shows the very close proximity that that point has with Forestville Road. This is the proposed zoning, the exhibit provided by the applicant showing that the part of the site to the north alongside I-40, most of that would be proposed for R10 conditional use. The RX3 portion would be the southern portion of that to the on the north side of Buffalo Road with tree conservation buffers along Buffalo Road. Next slide. Some conditions, the density would be limited in R10 to 6 dwelling units per acre. Also a 30-foot wide buffer along the northern boundary of the R10 district. 25% of that R10 CU district would be protected as open space, and the apartment building type would be prohibited. Also, the number of dwelling units in the residential mixed-use area would be limited to 300. Non-residential uses would be prohibited. There would be also a 50-foot building setback along the northern boundary of the residential mixed use, and as shown on the exhibit, a 30-foot wide undisturbed buffer along William and Mary Drive. Some comparisons. Note the increased density, number of maximum units. Again, no office or retail would be permitted in this proposal, and the setbacks would change. Next slide. This proposal is consistent with the flume designation of low-density residential due to the combination of building types and the density and the open space condition for that area. And also the proposed RX3 would be consistent with the neighborhood mixed use portion of that site as designated on the future land use map. Next slide. The retention, and the applicant does propose to retain the SHOD 1 overlay. This would require tree conservation or planting along I-540. This makes it consistent with the Parkway corridor designation on the urban form map. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan, is consistent with the future land use map and the urban form map. Note these consistent policies. These inconsistent policies were also noted. Again, your deadline for action is August 9th. There are no outstanding issues, and I will be happy to answer any questions regarding this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. Next, I would like to hear from Worth Mills representing the applicant. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox and members of the Planning Commission. Worth Mills here from Longleaf Law Partners on behalf of the applicant. I'm also joined by Caroline Cheeves and Reinald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp, who performed the TIA for this site. Also present is the applicant Bill Turner of the Turner Group. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as Don mentioned, Z5820 requests to rezone approximately 50 acres of 7425 Buffalo Road from AP to R10 and RX3, retaining that existing SHOD overlay. The property currently has one single-family home and was last timbered approximately a decade ago. As Don mentioned as well, this request is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall, and is compatible with the surrounding area. This rezoning would facilitate new homes and housing variety near I-540, as well as those road improvements that are necessary to lessen the traffic issues along Buffalo Road. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the aerial of the site and the surrounding area. You've got I-540 buffering the upper L and Buffalo Road fronting the lower L. Again, this rezoning concerns only the northern portion of this site. That portion south of Buffalo Road, not subject to this rezoning. Next slide, please. And then here you can better see the electrical substation and the single-family home on the lower L portion of this site. Next slide. So the site is currently zoned for agricultural production. Most of the parcels within the Buffalo Road 540 interchange are zoned AP as well. Most of the land north and east of our property is zoned R4. And then we do have a couple of mixed-use districts south of Buffalo Road. Next slide, please. So this parcel has three different future land use map designations. The upper L designated as low density residential, which recommends density between 1 and 6 units per acre. The lower L is deemed neighborhood mixed use, which encourages typically small scale retail that would serve maybe a mile or less of a radius. We are prohibiting all non-residential uses. In the RX3 district, we are proposing solely a residential project here. And then finally, we have the public parks and open space designation that runs along the eastern boundary of this site. That denotes a stream that flows north towards a pond just off the screen there. Next slide, please. So here we have again our proposed zoning districts, and also included in this are the conditions that we have included in our request. So the upper L is proposed as an R10 district with that SHOD overlay. And here the applicant intends to construct townhomes at a density of 6 units per acre or less, which is consistent with the low density residential future land use map guidance. At the northern boundary, you can where the Landover community ends and our property starts. You'll see that 30-foot undisturbed buffer, which we have included as a rezoning condition. As Don mentioned, we have set aside 25% of the net site area to be preserved as open area. And then you see in the dark green, that is the 50-foot TCA buffer along Interstate 540 per those SHOD 1 regulations. For the lower L, we've proposed RX3, where the applicant intends to build a mix of single-family cottages and apartments. Combined, those dwelling units would not exceed 300 units. As I mentioned earlier, we are prohibiting non-residential uses. The red dotted line represents the 50-foot building setback along the northern boundary and that portion of our property that fronts along William and Mary Drive. We have also included a 30-foot undisturbed buffer along William and Mary Drive to give those single-family residents a visual break from the development. And again, you see the 50-foot TCA buffer along Buffalo Road, consistent with that SHOD 1 regulation. Next slide, please. So here we have townhome concepts from EYC Companies, who has partnered with Mr. Turner on this project. These townhome units were built in James Island, South Carolina, as part of their Eaglewood Tree development. You see 2 stories, porches, very nice looking townhomes. Next slide, please. These are the single family cottages, which we are envisioning on the RX3 portion of the site. EYC Companies has built these cottages in both Huntsville, Alabama and Charlotte, North Carolina, and they have been pretty popular with the residents there. You see a mix of different building styles and building materials to create, some housing variety within that cottage community. Next slide, please. And then we have some different renderings here of ways that we could develop that. So you've got, again, kind of a 1.5 story unit there. Next slide. Here we've got a more standard 1 story unit. These, again, would be detached houses. Next slide. In this concept, we have more of an attached model with units spaced closer together. Next slide, please. But regardless of how these are situated, we do envision these single family cottages kind of enveloping a shared common open and amenity space to try and create a type of pocket neighborhood within the development. Next slide. And lastly, we have some apartment renderings on the site as well, with a mix of 2 to 3 stories in height. Next slide. And then lastly, we have an example of amenity space within that apartment area. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Caroline Cheeves with Ramey Kemp, who performed the traffic impact analysis, and she will review those findings. and be available to answer questions as well.
Sorry, Worth, who was that?
That was Caroline Cheeves.
Got her. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Hi, my name is Caroline Cheeves, but my last name was Bojarski about 3 weeks ago. I worked on the traffic impact analysis for this project. Currently, the traffic along Buffalo Road is operating poorly, and Buffalo Road is over capacity, as shown in this table. Additional through lanes along Buffalo Road will be necessary to not only achieve an acceptable level of service, but also to help mitigate the vehicle queuing. This proposed development will be increasing the traffic along Buffalo Road between 540 and Forestville by approximately 10% in the weekday AM peak hour and approximately 13% in the weekday PM peak hour. However, it is adding 2 additional through lanes along its frontage. Staff has identified that the 540 bridge will need to be widened, or an additional bridge will be needed in the future. The frontage widening that this development is committed to doing will be a key puzzle piece to allow the bridge to be widened, as it will provide the additional receiving lanes that the needed future bridge project would use. This development is a big part of the solution to bring Buffalo Road to an acceptable level of service. You can move to the last slide, please. In addition to the additional through lanes along Buffalo Road, the proposed development is also expected to improve the current configuration of William and Mary and provide additional capacity to the Forestville and Buffalo intersection. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll turn it back over to Worth.
Thank you, Caroline. So just to conclude, we want to reiterate again that this project is consistent both with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan overall. It's consistent and compatible with the surrounding development. It would, as Caroline mentioned, be a key puzzle piece in figuring out the Buffalo Road traffic issue with those 2 additional turn lanes. And we believe that this project is necessary to alleviate those existing concerns. And just to conclude, we would ask Planning Commission to recommend approval. And again, we are here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are 2 people signed up to speak in opposition of this request. If the moderator could please introduce the first speaker.
Yes, the first speaker is Matt Carter.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Commissioners. I'm a resident of William and Mary Drive. Our neighborhood is over 40 years old and consists of over a dozen rural single-family homes on lots that range in size from approximately 2 acres to 10 acres. Many of my neighbors on William and Mary, and also residents from the neighboring community on Landover, are very concerned about this proposed rezoning and development, as evidenced by the neighborhood petition signatures that I submitted to the Commission last week. The proponent's current plan for development on this site, which was revealed to us in the second neighborhood meeting, is to build rental townhomes on the western half of the property and a mixture of rental single-family homes and apartment buildings on the eastern half of the property. We believe that the only appropriate use for the eastern half of the property is low-density single-family homes. Therefore, we request that the Commission recommend against the rezoning of this property for residential apartments or any commercial uses. This rezoning and subsequent development will affect our neighborhood more than most rezoning cases that you hear, because our neighborhood will be losing our current access to Buffalo Road in this process. Once this property is fully developed, we will have to drive through this new development as our sole method of ingress and egress into and out of our neighborhood. Thus, if the developer's current rezoning and development plans were to be realized, it would mean that we would be forced to drive through an apartment complex every day just to get into and out of our rural single-family residential neighborhood. The comprehensive plan policies are meant to promote responsible and thoughtful development, as well as to protect existing neighborhoods and communities from these types of inappropriate rezoning requests. This current proposal is inconsistent with a number of comprehensive plan policies that are designed to protect the integrity and character of longstanding neighborhoods like ours. As I'm sure that all of you are very familiar with the policies, I'm not going to take the time to quote the policies to you, but I and my neighbors have the reasonable expectation that these policies will be followed by this commission. This rezoning request and development plan, as currently designed, is not reasonable and not in the public interest because it is inconsiderate of existing residents, not compatible with the surrounding area, and does not include appropriate transition requirements. Any commercial development of this land would also be inappropriate for the same reason that apartments are inappropriate, as stated previously. I and my neighbors are also concerned that the developer is planning to make all of the residential units, including the townhomes and single-family homes, rental units rather than resident-owned properties. But I also want to make it very clear that we are in no way trying to disparage renters or apartment dwellers. Most of us have been renters or apartment dwellers at some point in our lives, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, it does change the character of the neighborhood when going from a neighborhood of all resident-owned homes to one surrounded by rental units. To illustrate, I've lived in my home in this neighborhood since 1989, and our other neighbors of mine have lived in their homes even longer. So going from a neighborhood of families where you know your neighbors for decades to being blockaded by a new neighborhood that is more skewed towards single individuals and much more transient with many people staying for less than a year is a major incongruity. In our ideal world, we would want the entire property to be developed as resident-owned single-family homes, but we understand that may not be realistic given the needs for housing. And this is why we understand that townhomes are appropriate on the western half of the property as proposed.
Excuse me, Mr. Carter, I'm going to interrupt you for just 1 second, just to acknowledge that time is up and allow, without opposition of other commissioners, I'd like to allow Mr. Carter to be able to finish his comments because I understand the other speaker has not shown up to the meeting today. Okay, seeing no opposition, please continue, Mr. Carter, and you can finish your comments.
Thank you. And we understand that townhomes are appropriate on the western half of the property as proposed, and they are compatible with the existing units on Landover and would help increase the residential density of the area. And we also hope that townhomes and single-family units, even if they ultimately wind up being rental units, will attract more families and longer-term renters than apartment buildings would. In conclusion, single-family homes are the only type of development on the eastern portion of this property that would be compatible with the character and design of our neighborhood. We certainly understand the need for more housing, but our property values and daily life would be negatively affected if apartments were built in a way that requires us to drive through an apartment complex just to get into and out of our rural neighborhood as the developer currently plans to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just verifying with the moderator that we do not have any additional speakers.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. I'd now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I do.
Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I have a couple questions. The first question is, I'm trying to understand the comment about having to drive through the new development to get to Buffalo Road and not having direct access anymore. I would appreciate if staff could comment on that, please. And my other question, because it's also traffic related, I'll just go ahead and ask it. The applicant noted that this development would be providing 2 additional through lanes. I think they said that would, I guess, accommodate the future widening of the 540 bridge. I think that's great, but as I understand it, the widening of that bridge is not funded. I don't believe any improvements to Buffalo Road are funded. And I just want to get confirmation of that, because if nothing is funded in the foreseeable future, then those 2 new through lanes, it would seem to me, are just going to lead to a bottleneck once it gets to the bridge. So it's not really going to improve conditions if there are no improvements on either side of them. I think those 2 questions are for staff.
So, seeing if someone from transportation was available, but in the interim, you are correct. The widening of the bridge and other improvements to Buffalo Road are, to my knowledge, not funded. While that doesn't mean that there's no value to the additions, it means that the value will be somewhat limited because you'll run out of extra lanes when you get to the bridge. What was the first question again?
The first question was, I just wanted some clarity around the comment that people in the existing neighborhood are going to have to drive through the apartment community to get to Buffalo Road.
Fontaine Burris here with Transportation. Ken, I can answer that.
Thank you.
So what is being proposed is that they are proposing to turn the end of William and Mary into a roundabout and provide a new public access street that would bring them out to Buffalo. That would bring them out to Buffalo Road, and this would help move. Right now, William and Mary is less than 100 feet from the current intersection with Forestville Road, which doesn't meet our street design standards. So this would help move that intersection away and provide a new access via a public street.
Fontaine, as a follow-up, is there another means of ingress or egress from that neighborhood? Do you know that?
I don't believe so. I'm pulling up a map right now. 1 second.
And while you're doing that, I'll allow Commissioner Bennett to ask a follow-up question.
There is.
I was just going to ask if we could see the map. It would be helpful if we could see it as Fontaine is talking about it.
And to answer that question, there's no other access other than William and Mary Road. You can see that right now, William and Mary Road, the intersection with Buffalo Road is very close to the intersection of Forestville Road. Our street design manual requires at least 300 feet spacing. Right now, it's under 100 feet. It's about 95 feet from the intersection. So they would be creating a new public road connecting Landover Ridge all the way down to Buffalo Road, and then a public street that would connect between Landover Road and William and Mary Road, so people could take William and Mary Road, the new street, over and then down Landover to get to Buffalo Road.
I'm sorry, Chair Fox. Where is Landover? Can you do that again? I missed that part. Can you trace that back out again? Sorry.
Landover Road is north of the property, and it would be pulled all the way down to connect to Buffalo Road.
The applicant has not submitted a conceptual site plan, have they?
We do not have one as part of this presentation, but that is correct in the sense that we envision Landover extending through the upper L of the site and then, coming to a signalized intersection at Buffalo Road. You can see the traffic signal on Buffalo Road between the two sections of tree conservation area. And we would be, again, altering William and Mary because right now those residents are, exiting onto Buffalo Road at an unsignalized intersection less than 100 feet from Forestville and Buffalo, which I think we all realize is extremely busy as it is. We would provide an entrance sort of in the middle of the RX3 portion that would then run down and also meet up at the signalized intersection at Buffalo Road. And so these William and Mary residents would not have, direct access from William and Mary to Buffalo, but they would be gaining a signalized intersection that would make it a lot safer to get in and out of their community.
Do any other commissioners have additional questions for the staff or applicant? Commissioner O'Haver?
I seem to recall, because I know we've had a lot of discussions previously about Buffalo Road. Am I remembering correctly that someone from staff had indicated that as these proposed developments come online and the improvements are made on either side of the bridge, that it accelerates the NCDOT funding? Because I hear Ms. Bennett say that it's not funded, but I thought we'd had some conversation. So could somebody remind me, or am I just making that up?
This is Caroline with Ramey Kemp, if I'm allowed to respond to this.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Yes, Brian, you are correct in that sense that providing this widening will sort of increase the NCDOT's rating of this, because as suggested, it would create a bottleneck. However, the point that I was trying to make is if the bridge is widened before this section of Buffalo Road is widened, that this development is adding, then it would create the opposite issue, where it would be a bottleneck from the bridge to Buffalo Road. And so what we're trying to say is that no one development can fix every single solution out here. No one development can widen the bridge and also widen all of Buffalo Road. And this section between Buffalo Road and Forestville is such a high traffic volume area that adding these 2 additional through lanes that this development is adding is a huge puzzle piece in improving the overall flow of traffic along Buffalo Road, and ultimately will help bring that bridge project forward.
Fontaine Burris here. I would also like to add that transportation and NCDOT reviewed the mitigations being submitted or proposed, and found that with those eastbound and westbound lanes, it would help avoid a level service of S and mitigate the traffic for this development.
Did I see an additional question from Commissioner Bennett?
I think Commissioner Lampman might have had her hand up first. I'll wait until she asks her question.
Okay, Commissioner Lampman.
This is one where I struggled last year about approving some of these high density residential developments in this area, and the traffic concerns, and driving Buffalo Road prior and seeing the debris from accidents on 540. I do have a lot more traffic related questions regarding how we can plan and accommodate some of the increase. I understand the concept, the concept of, well, if we create an F rating, therefore we're going to start getting more attention to this site, and therefore NCDOT is probably going to start funding. But at the same time, I know of several sites or several cities throughout North Carolina who are also screaming for NCDOT's attention. So I think that I don't believe that it is in our best interest to rely solely on NCDOT. They would likely appreciate some of any additional assistance in terms of planning out this area. All that being said, I would ask or propose the concept that we send this to the traffic, the infrastructure or transportation committee for additional discussion, where we can really hash through some of the concepts of how traffic will be impacted on Buffalo Road, especially in light of the number of units and density that's been approved so far.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Littman. One thing I would acknowledge is we may run into a timing issue in that we take a break in July. So if we put that in committee, it doesn't pull it back to a full planning commission meeting until August. So just one thing to consider as we look through options. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. So much of what I was going to say echoes what Commissioner Lampman just said, so I won't repeat that, but I really don't have a problem with this development itself. I think it's a nice development. My concern, which shouldn't come as any surprise because I say this when we have these rezonings on Buffalo Road, is that we're not creating a level of service F, it's already a level of service F. And I don't think it's smart planning to say if we just keep making it worse and worse and worse, then eventually NCDOT is going to fund the project. If they don't have the money, they don't have the money. And this area has been rapidly developing for the last several years, and the improvements still aren't funded. I don't think NCDOT, having worked with them for the last 25 plus years, I don't think they're just sitting there going, oh, we're not going to fund this. I think there are serious funding issues. And I mean, perhaps if the traffic gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and more people are in accidents and get injured and die, then maybe the priority of Buffalo Road will move up. But I'm not willing to take that chance. I just think the infrastructure, for me, the infrastructure should be in place before the development. I don't think we should keep developing and then ask the infrastructure to catch up with it, because the funding isn't always there for the infrastructure. If we can't do it all together, I realize that this development is providing infrastructure improvements, and that's great, but it's the next one and the next one. So I'm more concerned about the existing conditions and the cumulative effect of one more development on Buffalo Road to the already burdened traffic conditions. So I'm not, while I like the development itself, I'm not inclined to support approval of a rezoning that's just going to overburden the transportation system even more than it already is, without any funded improvements in sight.
Commissioner Rains?
Thanks, Commissioner Fox. Just a quick question for the applicant. The intent of the neighborhood mixed use and the applicant's desire to make the southern L RX3 with the condition that there's only residential uses is kind of contrary to the mixed use intent. So wanted to ask the applicant if they would be willing. I know that they may not pursue mixed use, but if they'd be willing to strike that condition. And there's a lot of potential units here, a lot of potential people. There could be a benefit to have some sort of designation of true mixed use for this segment along Buffalo Road.
Is the applicant available to answer questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rains. And I will say that when we first came to the first neighborhood meeting, we did include non-residential uses within our zoning. We had actually included an Annex 3 portion as well on that lower L. After that meeting with neighbors, it was pretty clear to us that they did not want to see commercial uses here. And so as a compromise, we came back at that second neighborhood meeting and said this, we are willing to make this a residential only development. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable going back at this stage and removing that prohibition on non-residential uses.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Lampman?
I have two administrative or technical questions. One might take a minute to research and then I'll ask the second. Can we look up to see which of the approved zoning cases have actually started to pull permits for development. That's for staff. And then just a general question for maybe Roberta or David. I know that the text change, I think, came in that we would have a 60-day limitation on voting approvals. Was that passed? I apologize for not following that particular text change. And then as a follow-up, how does that apply to our 1 month leave or vacation, whatever we call it, for July?
This is David. The zoning process text change was approved at the last city council meeting. It is not in effect yet. So the 90-day review period is still in effect on this case.
How are those timelines affected by our 1 month leave?
Well, I don't believe you meet before the August 9th. I mean, you'll meet again later this month. And then I'm not sure when the next meeting is before your first August meeting, but your first August meeting is going to be after the August 9th 90-day deadline.
Is your question as to whether or not the break in your schedule has any impact on the 90-day clock ticking? It does not. It continues to tick through your break. So there is the possibility, obviously, of requesting a time extension, which I know would be proactive since the deadline is a couple months away. But given the realities of the calendar and what we're hearing is a desire to dive a little bit more deeply into the transportation issues, I think the only other alternative were if you were to act on this case but still wanted to get a more complete report on the transportation issues in the area, that could be a topic that could be referred to your transportation committee. But then you would not have that information in time to incorporate it into your review of this case. So it seems that those are probably your two options right now, given what staff is hearing about your desire for a more complete transportation report. And it sounds like option one gives you more information to act on this case.
And if I may, as a follow-up, just kind of general comments to that, I think that one, if we ask for an extension, I would venture that the council would be supportive of that. I don't know how many extensions we've asked for thus far this year. It feels like it's been less than last year. I don't know if that could be used as a statement. And then also with the number of approvals for Buffalo Road that we've had recently, I know that there was significant deliberation on some of the prior developments by council. So I think that they could appreciate the fact that we're diving into a little bit deeper there. And then just in general with the break, I don't feel like we have enough time to really thoroughly support this case.
Just one quick thing. Staff is verifying that the August 9 deadline in your packet is correct. So let's just, before action is taken, let us make sure that that we give you the correct date.
Commissioner O'Haver?
In the meantime, while Director Bowers is finding that info, I mean, I guess it comes back to a lot of conversations we've been having on not only this corridor, but other projects. I certainly understand and know, especially last year, we've had lots of conversations about Ms. Lampman, Ms. Bennett. I believe Ms. McIntosh had some concerns. I guess maybe she had to drop off. I don't see her on there. But a deeper dive is where's that going to get us? I mean, we're pushing this thing out 2 months. The bridge, I mean, we're looking at a development on the east side. It does look like a very nice development. And I think, you know, the echo chamber of the need for housing, et cetera. I don't want to dismiss Ms. Bennett and Ms. Lampman's concerns, but I'm just not certain what a 2-month extension is going to do if the bridge isn't funded and we're looking at a parcel directly adjacent to the bridge that's providing through lanes. It's not making the condition necessarily, it's not making the level of service worse. I'm not going to say it's not making the condition worse. So again, with all due respect, I'm not certain. Maybe Ms. Lampman or Ms. Bennett can help me understand why I should feel like we need to defer this case.
Commissioners, this is Ronald Stevenson. I think this is a kind of good time for me to jump in. I've been kind of listening, but wanted to, if I could take one more crack at the sort of the overall transportation kind of piece of the puzzle that Caroline mentioned. There are a lot of developments out here, and our firm has been representing a lot of those. We are currently working with staff and DOT right now to try to find a solution that does not require widening the bridge or building a new bridge. And what we're looking at doing is trying to repurpose the lanes on the existing bridge to handle some of the heavier traffic movements. But what I can tell you is that in the overall scheme of that concept that we're looking at, the widening that is necessary or would be done by this project is the critical piece to that shorter term solution. We just have to have the lanes along this property, the extra lanes along this property, to be able to repurpose that bridge to do that. So we are looking at it. The other thing I would point out is just the safety impacts of relocating William and Mary through this property to a signalized condition. That is a big safety improvement for that area too, that shouldn't be overlooked as well. But there are bigger pieces of the puzzle out here that we're working on. But the frontage widening that would be done here is absolutely critical to being able to make that work, and not necessarily wait on DOT to fund something. We're trying to get something done now.
If I could jump in, I mean, that's enough for me. If Ms. Bennett, Ms. Lampman would still like to respond, I'd like to hear. But I think hearing that from you, Ronald, I think that is a big piece of the puzzle that would be helpful. So I'm happy to defer the case to dive into what those solutions are a little bit more. But again, if Ms. Lampman or Ms. Bennett would like to respond, I'm happy to hear. But I'm okay deferring after hearing that.
Commissioner Bennett?
To be clear, I wasn't asking to defer the case. I don't, if we defer the case, the bridge isn't going to be funded. The improvements aren't going to happen. So I don't know what deferring the case gets us. I mean, we can hear more about what we hope can happen. I'm just not, and remember last year when we had a case or two on Buffalo, we deferred them several times and got tons and tons and tons of information about transportation or traffic on Buffalo Road. So it would seem to me we're just going to get more of the same. I seem to recall council also requested that staff come back with a detailed report about traffic and transportation improvements on Buffalo Road for one of those projects. So I'm not asking for more information. I feel like I have enough information, and I don't think anything is going to change substantially in the next couple of weeks or months. So I'm good moving with the case now.
Commissioner Lampman?
I can understand those statements. I think just from my perspective, it's can we look at something? Can we find something else that we can do here on this particular site, or that can create some sort of precedence, or something that we can actually have some time to really think of and dive into? If Commissioner O'Haver is fine with that ability for us to discuss that. Now, if it does go to the Transportation Committee, and in that discussion, I would hope that we would dive into some of these things and talk about other solutions where we might be able to partner with DOT or the city in that regard. So I would hope that we could find and again, I agree with everybody else. It's not the project. We do need housing desperately. Like I would want to support this case. The traffic has been such an issue in this area, and because it's so tertiary right now, it has been overlooked. And so I would just like to see if we could come up with something, and unfortunately it's at a time where, you know, DOT is constrained funding wise. I don't know if staff had an opportunity to look at pulled permits yet for the other developments, but I'm still curious about that.
We have not, but I did want to give you a correct date on the deadline. It's actually September 6th. So that would mean you would have meetings in August to receive a committee report if that was the will of the commission, and then still meet your deadline without asking for a time extension.
So it appears we have a number of options on the table right now in terms of presenting a vote today. I can see some commissioners signaling that they are ready to move forward. We also have the option of deferring to our next full planning commission meeting, which is in 2 weeks, or there's been the option floated of moving to the transportation committee. One other thing I'll offer on transportation committee is you may be challenged in your June meeting to have a quorum just based on vacation schedules, as I understand them. Commissioner O'Haver, did you have a comment?
I mean, I'd like to make a motion to defer it to our next PC meeting versus Transportation Subcommittee. I agree with Ms. Bennett. I mean, the thing that changed my mind about that, because I started out with my comment saying, why are we going to defer? The thing that I would like to hear about is to understand a little bit better about what the overall plan is for the bridge and some of the stuff that Rhino talked about. To Ms. Bennett's point, the rest of the stuff along the corridor, we've gotten that information. It's not going to change that. The piece of information, the piece of the puzzle, as the applicant referred to it, and I'm sitting here staring at the bridge. So, Rhino, I can't wait to see how you're going to do your magic on that bridge. But that's really what I'm specifically interested in. I think we can probably get through that in the next meeting without taking it to transportation. But that's, well, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to make a motion to defer to our next planning commission meeting to receive additional information on contemplated infrastructure improvements, specifically around the intersection at 540 and the bridge.
Right. Commissioner Lampman?
Second.
Okay, we have a formal motion by Commissioner O'Haver and a second by Commissioner Lampman to defer the case for 2 weeks. Commissioner Bennett?
I just have a comment, and I just want to make sure that we are mindful that we treat each case in each community the same way. So it feels to me often that we bend over backwards to accommodate developers. Like it's painful for us to say no. And as I say, sometimes a no is a no. But I just want to make sure that we also allow this same type of deep dive when there's a community coming to us asking us to listen to their concerns and that they want more information about something. I want us to remember how often we give developers another opportunity to give us a deep dive, even when it may not change our minds. We defer, we tell them to come back with more information. So I want to make sure that we do the same thing on each case, regardless of where it is, regardless of what type of case it is. I want to make sure we're being equitable in the amount of time and effort we give to each case.
Thank you for your comments. It's an excellent observation. We do have a formal motion of deferral from Commissioner O'Haver and the second by Commissioner Lampman. And I believe because this is not the final disposition of the case, we can vote by a show of hands. And I get a thumbs up. All those in favor of deferring for 2 weeks, if you could raise your hand. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those opposed? The motion passes 6-1. Okay, moving on to the next item on our agenda, that is case number Z121. This is a request to rezone approximately 15 acres of land from residential 6 to community mixed use 7 stories conditional use and community mixed use 12 stories conditional use. This request has not been previously discussed. I'd like to ask for a staff presentation from Don Belk.
Good morning. Thank you again, Chair Fox, members of the commission. This case is to a request to rezone about 15 acres from its current R6 to commercial mixed use, 7 stories and 12 stories with conditions. Your deadline is August 23rd. As you see, the area is predominantly commercial mixed use, office mixed use, and planned development. There's a substantial area of residential mixed use, and you see the R6 of the proposed site and the adjoining Crabtree Woods neighborhood to the west. Just a general overview. This is located very near the Crabtree Valley Mall and various medium density residential development and office developments also in the vicinity. And a closer perspective showing the site. It is presently vacant and heavily wooded. Note the single family residential neighborhood of Crabtree Woods to the north and west. Next slide. Some perspectives, Edwards Mill. This is to the north and east of the site as Edwards Mill curves around, and also a view east from Edwards Mill showing the boundary of the site at Crabtree Woods. Next slide. A few streetscapes, the entrance to the current use of the site, Pinnacle Apartments, and this is a street, Arkelton Drive is a street within Crabtree Woods, and newer development at Crabtree Creekside, which is located also to the north and east of the site. There are a number of conditions proposed here. There would be a maximum of 850 residential units. Retail would be limited to 25,000 square feet, and office would be limited to 360,000 square feet. One condition of note, this proposal would establish a trip generation budget that would limit peak hour trips to match the equivalent of the proposed maximums of residential and retail uses. Some uses would be prohibited in this proposal, and also for any building that exceeds 5 stories, at least 75% of the required parking would be within a parking structure. There is a portion of the site that would be zone CX7 that would there would be a limitation there of 6 stories. Screening of the upper stories of structured parking would be required. Also, the parking, 2 bays of on-site parking. These 2 conditions are meant to replicate kind of a hybrid frontage for this location. And also condition 11, the trip generation budget would be recorded as a restricted covenant for any future lots. So this requirement would run with the land over time. Next slide. This is an exhibit submitted by the applicant showing the division of the site, the CX12 portion, and the CX7 would be of 200-foot wide section adjoining RX6. Adjoining the R6 portion of Crabtree Woods. This CX7 area, again, would limit heights to 6 stories. Next slide. Comparison between existing and proposed zoning. Clearly, the change from residential 6 to commercial mixed use is substantial in terms of the increase in density and number of units, and note the changes in setbacks as well. Again, I wanted to point out the maximum residential units has been capped at 850. The office square footage has been capped at 360,000 square feet. I must note that the staff report did not note this limitation. This is the correct figure, 360,000 square feet. Retail is also capped at 25,000, and note the change in floor area ratio. Scores well in our transportation and energy analysis. All high bike, walk, and transit scores. There is a higher transportation cost index and a higher job proximity than average. The site is served by several Go Raleigh routes, as shown here. The proposal does not include subsidized units. However, it does add to the housing supply and permit a variety of uses, housing uses within walking distance of transit. These are the demographic indicators from our EJ screen. This is part of our new equity analysis that we've recently added to our staff reporting. I note that the changes in median 2-bedroom rent are basically match the average for the city as a whole. Note there are some demographic differences between this site and the city as a whole. The property was originally annexed in 1982. There was no evidence found related to any urban renewal programs or racial exclusion covenants. The requested zoning of commercial mixed use is consistent with regional mixed use, as this site is designated on the flume. Apologize for that error. This is regional mixed use. And the conditions meant to replicate a hybrid frontage make this proposal consistent with its location along an urban thoroughfare and its location within a city growth center. It is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan as noted. Again, that is consistent with the flume designation of regional mixed use and the consistency with the urban format. A number of policies, note the consistent policies on this slide and following with additional consistent policies. A few inconsistent policies were noted, mostly related to the area-specific guidance, the Crabtree area plan. One general policy on building height transitions was also noted as inconsistent. And the reason for that inconsistency was generally just the proposal did not address these elements specifically. And also there were, with the exception of one condition that limited the height to 6 stories, there were no other conditions related to the height transition, and conditions to address that could remove that inconsistency with policy LU 5.7. Again, your deadline for action is August 23rd. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belk. Next, I would like to hear from Toby Coleman representing the applicant. The applicant and all those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chair Fox. Good morning, Commissioners. Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson here on behalf of the applicant, Pinnacle Apartments. My address is 150 Fayetteville Street. I presume everybody can hear me? I'm in a slightly different setup, so just want to confirm that everybody can hear me.
Correct, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So with me today are a couple other folks who are here in case we need to answer questions. I've got Roger Edwards of the ownership group along with Ken Crockett. Also on the phone, again, available to answer questions is Tommy Craven of Priest Craven. And then also, I'm getting some echo. I don't know if that's just on my side. And then we've got a repeat of the traffic folks from your last case. We've got Reinald Stevenson and Caroline Cheeves here with us from Ramey Kemp. Reinald will speak briefly on some of the traffic issues at the end. To start out, before I sort of kick off and move through these slides, I want to note that this is the rare rezoning where there's not a specific development plan or contract to sell the property for development, pushing this forward. Instead, this is brought forward by the current owners of the property as part of planning for the future. The reason they're doing that is that the apartments that are currently on the site, the Pinnacle Apartments, were built about 40 years ago. And, you know, as like people, as apartments age, you have to start thinking about the future. And they're getting to a point where we really need to think about what is the future, especially given the changes in this area. So the current apartments, there's about 78 garden apartments, and market rate is about $980 a month for 1 bedroom, $1210 a month for 2 bedroom. We have kept the current tenants apprised of the rezoning proposal from the start, as consistent with the new city policy, and as part of to make sure that this future development does not negatively create hardships for existing tenants. Existing tenants have been given the opportunity to extend their leases through 2022. If you go to the next slide. So I thought I'd just kick off and show you sort of, in thinking about why the rezoning is appropriate, I thought it would be helpful to show a couple of maps side by side. The earliest map I could find on Google Maps was from February 1993. But it shows the change in this area, which is sort of the area to the west and south of Crabtree. You know, you've got famous Kids Hill down there to the south, along with what's now Glen Lake. To the far left of both of those pictures. It used to be a horse pasture in 93 until it's been developed into an office park. You now have a number of those other stars. You have a number of apartment developments, medium and higher density developments, as Don mentioned. If you could go to the next slide. So in thinking about the rezoning, you know, we did take a look at the city's policies, and this property is right in the heart of the Crabtree Growth Center, designated for mixed use and walkable development in light of its proximity to transit and access to transit, and employment centers, both with Crabtree to the east and Glen Lake Office Park to the west. City policy envisions that the mixed use redevelopment for this site, and guidance within the comprehensive plan calls for height up to 20 stories. If you go to the next slide. So what we're proposing, as Don outlined, is actually a sort of a split zoning of the property, with CX12 in the heart of the property, closer to all the commercially zoned properties, with a 200-foot wide band of CX7, subject to some additional height restrictions that I'll detail a little bit later in this presentation. Along the boundaries to the north and to the west with Crabtree Woods. Crabtree Woods, just for your reference, is a duplex neighborhood, and based on property records, primarily renter occupied. As Don noted, the benefits of the proposed rezoning include, you know, extensive increase in housing for the area, as well as development of mixed-use development with access and housing with access to transit. I will note that we've had 2 neighborhood meetings per city requirements. And we have not heard any concerns from the owners or residents in the Crabtree Woods about the height or the proposed height. One of the zoning conditions does limit it to 6 stories. And I'll go to the CX7 transition area a little bit later in this presentation. If you go to the next slide. So again, as I said, there's no specific plan associated with this rezoning, but it does envision a mixed-use development, primarily multifamily with neighborhood retail and restaurants. And so what the zoning conditions create a cap for is 850 apartments max with up to 25,000 square feet of retail and restaurant max. There's also a cap for 360,000 square feet of office. But the way that the zoning conditions are set up, essentially, for every square foot of office that you have to reduce either the apartments or the retail to meet the traffic budget. The traffic budget was created to ensure that the road network does not get overwhelmed by the development. Is based on the TIA and reviewing what would be created by 800, basically the traffic generated by 850 apartments and 25,000 square feet of retail. If you go to the next slide. This is my effort to try to sort of show, illustrate in some rough way what the trip budget basically does. You can either, you have sort of 3 choices. I've shown the 2 extreme choices on either end there. One is the max residential retail with no office. The other is max office. You could obviously do something in between. Given the area, given, the current uses of the area, we think that, something closer to the max residential retail residential is probably going to be what develops here. But this rezoning, since it's not associated with a specific development plan, seeks to create some flexibility there. If you go to the next slide. So as I promised, here's sort of a little bit deeper dive on the neighborhood transition. We did try to meet the policies related to basically transitioning down to a lower height near residential as you move from sort of higher density down to residences. And so what we did was, as you know, there's a neighborhood transition section in the UDO that basically says that you can't have any buildings within 50 feet of the Crabtree Woods apartments. And then there's some height restrictions within 100 feet. What we did was we added with a zoning condition that caps height within 200 feet of the Crabtree Woods development to 6 stories. So basically the idea there is to create some additional transition down as you get to the Crabtree Woods development. Again, it's sort of a unique development in that it's sandwiched in between Crabtree and Glen Lake. So there is a fair amount of height that already exists in this area. And we have not heard any concerns from neighbors. You go to the next slide. I want to hand off the presentation to Reinald Stevenson so we can talk a little bit about the TIA and the expected road network. One feature of this that was mentioned a little bit in the presentation, but not completely, is that part of the development of this property will be a new road running along this sort of the southern property line. Reinald?
Yeah, thanks, Toby. So as with the other project we were talking earlier, we've done a traffic study. TIA for this particular site has been reviewed and approved by both city staff and NCDOT. One of the things that we were kind of excited about is this transportation planning exercise to connect through this site to Holly Lane, which is represented in that sort of medium blue dashed line sort of in the middle of the page there. And what that does, it allows the traffic, not only from our site, but others to have multiple options to be able to connect from Edwards Mill, Crabtree Valley to Blue Ridge Road. So we think that's going to really help disperse the traffic quite nicely here and avoid any congested areas. As part of the TIA recommendations and the requirements of the city and DOT, we'll be adding left turn lane on Edwards Mill at our main entrance point. We're also going to be widening Holly Lane at Blue Ridge Road to provide an additional exiting lane there to just help provide some additional stacking there for cars turning on to Blue Ridge Road. One other item that you may see or hear about is we also are working with staff. We're going to need to follow up with staff on accommodating pedestrians coming from the site to be able to get over to Crabtree Mall. So that's one item we'll be following up with them on, but we will be adding some turn lane infrastructure there to accommodate vehicle traffic as well. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer those at the appropriate time.
Thank you all for your presentation. I believe the time may be up, but we'll hold for questions for you. It does not appear that there are any members of the public signed up to speak on this request. So I'd like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Commissioner Lampman?
Okay, sorry, I had trouble with the mute. So I think folks know here that I'm in affordable housing. So this is, some of the things that I think about as we bring on new units. Yes, it increases the housing supply. And, I am one that appreciates that, and it creates new opportunities. The one thing that I really struggle with here, and I don't know if it's just to make a point or what, but there's, natural occurring affordable housing. The rents are naturally lower here. These folks are going to be displaced. They're not going to be able to afford the new product that's in here. And I don't think that the existing product that is in the surrounding neighborhood will be able to absorb those folks who will be essentially relocated. I don't know the number of tenants that this site maybe accepts Section 8 vouchers for, but this would be a traditional site that would potentially pick up a lot of tenants that would have vouchers. Contrary to that, and I apologize for a soapbox, but I just think that it's important to talk about some of these things. But alternatively, if something like this is not approved, the current, the economics of putting money back into the project and keeping it, up to date, that also is going to be a hindrance to you don't want an existing, naturally occurring affordable housing product to deteriorate either. So I'm just going to make those general statements. Obviously, I don't want to see us lose, the housing for all folks and demographics, but I just don't know where these folks are going to go. So just wanted to kind of make those comments. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Would the applicant like to address any of those statements?
Sure. This is Toby Coleman. Commissioner Lampman, thank you for your comments. Those are very thoughtful and obviously come from a place of deep knowledge. In terms of your question about Section 8 housing, I did check with the ownership. There are no tenants with Section 8 vouchers currently. It is all market rate. I think your point is well taken. And I think that's the ownership group has sort of taken a look at this, and frankly, your last point that there's a balance between preserving naturally affordable housing, but there's a point where, the investment required to maintain naturally occurring affordable housing, becomes more than you can, sort of work out on a balance sheet. That's really where this property is getting to. I believe a couple of buildings have already been damaged by fire. Is that correct? Yeah, by fire. One building has been damaged by fire and lost. And they have, the ownership group bought this property in 2000, has made investments throughout the process, throughout the last 20 years to maintain it and keep it as a high quality place. But they are at the point where they're looking forward, and they know that they probably hit that point as far as age goes. I hope that answers some of your questions. I know that you're talking about some broader housing issues, and I can't obviously answer all of those, but hopefully that provides some additional information.
Thank you for that. Did I see another hand from commissioners? Commissioner O'Haver?
Yeah, can the applicant speak to the neighborhood meetings? Typically in our backup, I see where the agenda's in there, but I don't see a list of attendees. So could the applicant just give a little bit more detail about attendance from the adjoining neighbors and what those meetings, quote unquote, looked like?
Sure. Again, this is Toby Coleman. Our first meeting was held in December. We voluntarily, we were right at sort of the changeover from the old requirements where you didn't have to notify tenants to the new requirements. Where you do notify tenants, we voluntarily complied with the tenant notice requirement to ensure that everybody got notice. We sent out hundreds of notices and I think got about, I want to say 10 to 12 attendees. I'm going off memory here. So if I'm shorting it or overstating it, it's only by a couple. At that meeting, really there wasn't the only questions, the main questions that we got related to whether there's a specific plan in place, which there is not, and whether, basically questions from the current tenants about whether they would be able to stay through their current leases, which they will be. And again, there's been a extension of all or opportunity to extend leases through end of 2022. So, pretty significant commitment to allow people to stay in their current place and a lot of notice about what could happen in the future. In our second neighborhood meeting, which is the larger notice meeting, we got some folks about the same size, about the same amount of attendees. We got some folks from the Martinique condo development. It is on that sort of Edwards Mill spur to the north of this property, north of Crabtree Woods. And a couple of those residents just had questions about traffic and, basically how this would impact them. Again, as Reinhold outlined, we believe that, the TIA has been structured and the zoning conditions have been structured to address those and mitigate any impacts. And in addition, it will create a new cross access across the south from Edwards Mill to Blue Ridge. And there are some other realignments going on there that are planned in this area. Hope that helps. If there's anything else I can provide, please let me know.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you, Chair Fox. I have a couple of questions. Commissioner O'Haver asked one of them, so thank you for allowing me to cross that one off my list. The staff report noted an inconsistent policy with the Crabtree area pedestrian circulation plan, and I'd like to hear more about that. My other question was, it's in a FEMA floodplain, and I'd like to hear more about the concerns around downstream flooding. And then I just want to echo Commissioner Lampman's concern about losing more naturally occurring affordable housing. I understand the balance and I understand the cost involved in trying to keep it up, but we keep reading these stories and seeing this happen that you can't afford to keep it up, so the people have to move. And I think it's great that they've been given the opportunity to extend their leases through the end of 22, but then I wonder what happens to them then. Because right now they're in a wonderful location in this growth center near the mall, near transit, which is where you would want people with limited incomes to be. And unfortunately, what we keep seeing over and over is the types of developments that are in these prime locations are not catering to the people with limited incomes. And so, I know that's not an issue for one developer to resolve, but it is a concern that when we talk about the balance between having naturally occurring affordable housing and affording the upkeep, the balance seems to be swinging towards pushing it out into the rural areas, and the people who need it most aren't getting the benefit of being in these prime locations. So, I guess that's just a sadness on my part. But the two questions are about the inconsistent policy with the pedestrian circulation plan and downstream flooding.
Commissioner Bennett, thank you for those questions. This is Toby Coleman again. I think I'm unmuted. Can everybody hear me? Just making sure.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
So I want to address your pedestrian question first, and then I'll probably hand this off to Tommy Craven in terms of your question regarding flooding, although I can give you a brief answer and then hand it off to the expert who knows more than me. But in terms of pedestrian, the Crabtree area plan calls for not a greenway, but a pedestrian access that runs east to west over this property. And it's consistent. Basically, there's a greenway that runs to the south of this property that's already sort of been designated and planned out. We think that we actually meet that guidance because, as I said, and as Mr. Stevenson pointed out, there's going to be a road that's going to need to be developed as part of any development of this property that runs east to west along the southern side of this property. And along with that road is going to come sidewalk as is required by the city. And so we think that that's going to satisfy the pedestrian access. I can't speak for Mr. Belk on his thoughts, but my understanding and my understanding, and again, Mr. Belk can correct me if I'm wrong, in talking with him last week about this specific issue, was that the inconsistency on that issue specifically came down to us not specifically addressing or referencing the Crabtree area guidance in our application. But we do think we meet that pedestrian requirement by providing that access. And again, as Mr. Stevenson stated, we are also there will be a pedestrian crossing Edwards Mill towards the mall. There's some uncertainty about exactly where that will go because there's uncertainty about exactly where that future road will go. So we haven't designated that in any plan or stated that specifically, and that's at staff's direction. In terms of flooding, there was as staff report noted, there's been reports of downstream flooding, from these general drainage basins. It's Crabtree Creek. I'm sure you've heard of reports of flooding too. What the UDO says is that there's various things you need to do to address it, but if you're less than 5% of the drainage area, you're exempt from those. We have provided staff with a map of the drainage basin and property prepared by Mr. Craven, which shows that this property is less than 5% of the drainage basin. And obviously, this property any development would be subject to stormwater requirements, all the floodplain protections under the code, and so would not, would be subject to all the requirements to ensure that there's not additional runoff coming from development, and that any existing, stream areas would be buffered, et cetera, except as allowed by street crossings and such things. If you have further questions, happy to kick it over to Mr. Craven. I do want to note on affordable housing that one of the a couple of things on that. I guess one thing I would say is that one of the things that will create that the overall policy and the overall market can do for affordable housing is as rents rise, it makes it more attractive for tax credit developers to come in and do affordable housing because they base their rents on AMI and things like that. And so, in some ways, Raleigh's rising boats will help with that. In terms of this specific property, the one thing I would say is again, this is a market rate development. It's 78 units, a relatively small development. We appreciate the concern, and we're trying to, my clients are trying to address that by, have voluntarily gone to the residents and extended leases through 2022. This is, for future redevelopment of the property. On some level, I think, the challenge is, they've done voluntarily quite a bit to try to ensure that the existing tenants can remain and have plenty of time in the event of future redevelopment. We're not saying that redevelopment is going to happen in 2023, but we're saying that's the earliest it could happen. So, there's not, as I said, there's not a specific plan in place. There's not, a contract to sell the property. This is the case of really, if you look at the city policy and the city guidance for where growth should happen and where denser development should happen in this city, it calls for it to happen here. And unfortunately, the rezoning is ancient on this property. It's R6. R6, as you know, is not even apartment aren't even allowed now in R6. So this is, an old development from another time. And, as we move forward, I think part of the way that, naturally occurring affordable housing is probably can't, what I would say is I'm not sure it can be viewed as a static thing. Naturally occurring affordable housing is going to change as new developments come online. What the naturally occurring affordable housing is going to be is going to be the stuff that's older. So, you may lose 78 units of naturally occurring affordable housing, but as newer units come on, you may find smaller units that are within this same median price range, and you may have newer units that then push other developments, including other older developments in this area, into a more competitive range and a different range.
Thanks for your comments. I'd like to just really quickly, before we lose the train of thought, could staff also comment on inconsistencies with area plan guidance?
Yes, Chair Fox, I'll be happy to. The inconsistencies were really noted because it was simply a matter that the applicant did not address the area-specific guidance. And Toby and I did talk about this last week, and he explained the pedestrian plan item, but it was simply a matter of omission that those policies were noted. The applicant simply didn't address those in the original submittal.
Thank you. And I believe I saw hands up for some additional comments. Commissioner Lampman, did you have a comment?
I think maybe Commissioner Bennett might have something that will tag on to what was just said. Mine's going to be a little bit different, I think.
Okay. Commissioner
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up since Toby was addressing my question and my comment, and thank you for your responses. I just want to say, I understand that there are only 78 units that might be lost, but it's 78 families that are going to have to go someplace else. And so that's my concern. And I also, the comment that I may get it wrong, but as rents rise, then it becomes more attractive for the low-income housing tax credit developers to. That's kind of almost like the last case we just heard. As the traffic gets worse, then it becomes more attractive for NCDOT to fund the improvements. So it seems like we're saying as the rents rise and the poor people get pushed out, then there's more incentive for somebody to come in and help them out, but they're gone at that point. So I appreciate the sentiment, but I still think, and I know as a planning commission, we don't have this authority, but I just still think there needs to be a lot more energy around being more proactive in planning for affordable housing. We keep hearing about these cases. They're bringing more housing online. We need housing, we need housing, we need housing. We need affordable housing. And if you look at the percentage of affordable housing cases we get versus market rate housing, you see it's really out of whack. And I understand you build more housing, it helps in the long run. I'm just concerned about the 78 families that have assurance through the end of next year. And then what? I just think we need to be more proactive in preserving this affordable housing and planning for it within these mixed income communities that we're proposing to develop.
Commissioner Lampman, I saw your hand. This is Toby Coleman. Would you mind if I addressed Commissioner Bennett's comments, or would you like me to wait?
For a second. Okay. Yeah, let me just clarify and just make sure no other commissioners had any outstanding questions. Commissioner Lampman?
Yeah, well, twofold, because I want to address that too, but I do think that if there is a need for addressing the Crabtree plans, I think that should happen anyway, because this is definitely a good project. It's got a lot of good visibility. I think that they can use those plans. So I'm just going to make that statement right here. And Toby, I appreciate your comments about affordable housing. This is my bread and butter here, but this is also where I think that there's a misconception, and this is talked about in the strategic planning committee, but I know not everybody gets to watch that, but it does not, a high tide does not raise all ships. And furthermore, the way that AMI is calculated right now, we're already at max LIHTC rents. So to that point, we're already there. So we don't need any additional help. But furthermore, that is already high rents. If we look at 80% AMI rents, we're already able to charge market rate rent. So that's not the big issue, but what LIHTC developers are more likely to do is to accept vouchers. So at least that's good, but we don't need any more help from rising rents. So I think that narrative should just go away. But furthermore, the rising rents also impacts the tenants that are going to be there. So it's unfortunate that rents are rising in that regard. And then furthermore, the only approved affordable housing projects through the LIHTC program that are getting done are 4% with substantial help out in the tertiary markets because land is so expensive. We cannot buy land in the city. Even if we have higher rents, we're not able to charge them because, at the 80%, we still have to satisfy 30% AMI demographics. So we can't get it to pencils, but at the end of the day, please be cautious about, substantiating your comments regarding rising rents, tax credits, because we can't get them done. There were no tax credits submitted for the 9% round this past year because we just can't get it done. So I'll just make those comments there because it's in my backyard.
Sure, understood. And thank you for those points. I should have been clear that I think, Raleigh has become a more attractive market, and the general market, including, all of the suburbs, has become a more attractive market because the rents have risen. But obviously it may not be that it continues, a benefit that continues. I do want to loop back, Commissioner Bennett, my client is also concerned about the 78 families. And that's why they have, extended, at the very start, before we even start taking comments and even start having neighborhood meetings, they were extending leases through 2022 and have done a lot to communicate with neighbors. We're certainly, my folks are certainly open to a discussion about whether there's something more that can be done. I think that, frankly, again, there's a little bit of a presumption about when and what is going to happen here that we don't have a specific development plan. So one of our difficulties is we can't specifically say, exactly how long it can go past 2022. But we're open to trying to figure out what if there's other concerns, what could we do to address those concerns? We're certainly open to hearing that.
Really quickly, for the applicant, my question to you would be, have you thought of additional ways to address the families? Would you consider coming back with more information regarding that? Would you consider addressing some of the other area plan inconsistencies? I believe my understanding is the area plan was merely not mentioned. It's not that the application or a potential project would in itself be inconsistent.
That's correct. If you'd like us to, the last question first, to respond to that, if you'd like us to supplement our application, we're happy to. I think, we felt we did address it. We do mention, as the staff report says, we do mention that there will be a new street built there. So we felt like we did address it. We may not have said, specifically, this is how this specific policy within the comprehensive, within the small area plan is going to be addressed. But we did put all the information in there. But to the extent that the Planning Commission would like us to, specifically write a supplement, we're happy to do that. Again, I think, as Mr. Belk said, the issue is not that we don't address these issues. Rather, it's that it wasn't specifically written out in a specific way in the application. In terms of, I guess I think we would ask for the board's guidance to the extent that y'all are looking for something more regarding the families. Are you looking for the nature of the tenants? Again, I mean, as I mentioned, the current rent is $908 for 1 bedroom, $1,200 for 2 bedrooms, which is right in the sort of medium rent range. It is all market rate. There's no subsidized housing. I'm not sure if there's specific questions about the nature of the tenants. We're happy to try to get that information to the extent we can disclose it. To the extent you guys are looking for some specific proposal, I think we'd love to hear what the commission is thinking.
Commissioner Lampman.
I understand everything that's being said, and I empathize again. I'll just reiterate, I think that we can go back to the Crabtree area specific guidance because I want to make sure that we have some hard action plan here. So that one I think we can address. Regarding solutions for the existing families, again, I don't know if there's an opportunity to accept vouchers. I know of one community down off of Western Boulevard that is accepting vouchers, and it's a new build, and it's but I don't know if that would be something that you would consider. I know it's something that we can't require. The other thing that might be an option is if you might be able to apply for Raleigh Affordable Housing Bond funds that might help support your pro forma at least in some regard, and then bridge the gap for some of the residents that might be there, might be able to help them stay there longer. But all of this at this point would just be, essentially affecting ingenuity and seeing how we can do things differently. But those are just some thoughts that I have. I don't know how to solve the affordable housing crisis just in general. I don't think anybody really does, but any little bit of effort that can help would be appreciated and is always appreciated.
Would the applicant be interested in additional time to address the area plan specific guidance?
Just so I'm clear, I mean, is the commission's request that we provide something in writing? I mean, I think I can go through it orally for you right now because I think we've generally addressed it and can. And again, I think as Mr. Belk stated, I think the issue is not the facts. The issue is just whether it's specifically in writing.
I believe it would be a request to see that in writing.
Okay. Yeah, we're happy to provide an appendix if that is the commission's request.
Okay. With no opposition, I'd like to recommend that we defer this case to our next meeting. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. We don't necessarily need a formal vote for that. We have a significant amount of time to review this one. So we will move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Case number Z1421. And I believe this request, we will have to recuse Commissioner O'Haver. Without objection, Commissioner O'Haver is recused from hearing case number Z1421. Okay, seeing none, Commissioner O'Haver.
Yes, Chair Fox, again, just let everyone know, I know you and I communicated, I also have a 12 o'clock hard stop. So if this runs past 12, y'all won't see me again, so.
All right.
Well, you'll see me again, just not today. At least I hope you'll see me again, just not today.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay, Commissioner O'Haver is recused. This case number Z1421, is a request to rezone approximately 1/2 acre of land from downtown mixed use 12-story shopfront to downtown mixed use 40-story shopfront conditional use. This request has not been previously discussed, so I would like to ask for a staff presentation from Ira Mabel.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Right, your deadline for this case is in August because it has appeared on your consent agenda previously. So the request is in downtown, which uniformly zone DX of various heights, mostly 12 and 20 in this area. Next slide. If reviewing the staff report gave you a sense of deja vu, I would say that is how I felt to write it. You can see here the site sort of at the top there where Harriet and Harrington meet, and another case you just heard recently, C5420, directly across the street. Next slide, please. So currently this is the Legends nightclub. There are 2 or maybe 3 buildings that are all owned by the same owners, part of their complex, and some surface parking. Next slide. So the zoning conditions currently prohibit 5 uses otherwise allowed, and then similar to the Z5420 case, this applicant has included some draft language being developed or going through the text change process currently for some enhanced parking deck screening. So specifically about the screening material itself and shielding internal light sources. Next slide, please. So quite a substantial increase in entitlement here, going from 12 to 40. Yeah, next slide. These next couple of slides are pretty boring for downtown sites in general. You need lots of access to transit. This location is very close to what will be the new Rust Bus facility in particular. Next slide. And so lots of bus services go around town, and will only improve as rerouting to the new bus terminal happens over time. Would add to the housing supply, allow all types of housing. Currently does not include requirement for subsidized units. And the new demographic analysis, pretty close to citywide average on all points. Next slide. So the request is consistent with the central business district, which would point to a downtown mixed-use zoning. And next slide is consistent with the urban 4 map. They do have the full shopfront frontage in this request. So consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Next slide, please. The policy analysis is very similar to the site on the south side. The slight differences being really about the shopfront frontage and the evolution of that case to the south. So consistent with most policies. You can skip ahead. Consistent with the Downtown West Gateway policy, and then again similar to the case you just heard on the inconsistent policies. Really just talking about the height, the 40-story height request compared to what exists today, which is on the next slide, JP. Yeah. Next slide, please. So no other outstanding issues, and you have a few scheduled meetings left to discuss this should you wish. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mabel. Now I'd like to hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair Fox and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jennifer Ashton. I'm a land use attorney with Longleaf Law Partners, and I'm here today on behalf of the owner of the property, City Plat Legends, LLC. Ira did a great job in his written staff report and just a moment ago in his presentation, kind of explaining the nature of our request. So I'm going to try not to be too repetitive here and move through these slides quickly, and that will save us more time for questions. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And just a quick overview of the property. Our parcels are about 0.5 acres in total. Currently, they do house the Legends nightclub complex. Our current zoning is DX12 with a shopfront frontage. Our future land use designation is, as Ira said, the central business district. And our proposed zoning is to keep DX and keep shopfront, but go from 12 stories in height up to 40 stories in height. We do have some proposed conditions associated with this rezoning request. We have some use prohibitions, which are listed below. We also have some parking structure and lighting screening conditions that we have agreed to add. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And I borrowed this from Ira's presentation because it's a fantastic aerial photo of kind of where we are sited in relation to other residential properties and also to existing and upcoming transit. Our site is highlighted in yellow. The Highwoods Goodwill site rezoning request that you heard, I believe, about a month ago is directly to our south, as is the Dillon property. Park Devereaux and Nash Square are to our east, as is the Raleigh Municipal Building. The Hugh is directly adjacent to us, and the Dawson is directly to our north. I did want to highlight too that we are in very close proximity to Union Station and also to the Go Raleigh Regional Bus Facility. If we could go to the next slide. And this is a map of the current zoning. As Ira mentioned, we are in downtown mixed use. All of our adjacent properties are also DX. The height ranges, our immediate adjacent neighbors are between 12 and 20 stories. If we could go to the next slide. This is the future land use map. This shows that we are in the central business district. Nash Square is public parks and open space, but everything else around us is also central business district. DX is the primary recommended zoning district for this land use designation, so we are consistent with our future land use. If we could go on to the next slide. This is a slide of the urban form map. We are designated as both a downtown center and a core transit area on the map. These designations recommend an urban frontage, and we are proposing to keep our shopfront frontage, so we are meeting this urban form guidance. The shopfront frontage, as you all know, is designed to promote the highest level of walkability and create more of a Main Street type environment, and we believe we're meeting that requirement. If we could go to the next slide. This is the height recommended table from the comprehensive development plan. I did highlight for you that we are in the central business district and we are in that core transit area under the urban form map. So a minimum of 3 stories and a maximum of 40 stories is recommended. We are proposing 40 stories, so we are consistent with this height recommendation. And if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. This is the Downtown West Gateway area plan, and I just wanted to point out that we are within the station area core. There is a box towards the top right portion of this map designated as high density mixed use. It says a minimum of 4 stories. Our property is located directly under that box, so we are in the station area core. We are in close proximity to the Raleigh Union Station and the regional bus facility, and our rezoning request is supported by this area guidance. We will be helping to support the existing transportation hubs. And if we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And this is just a quick summary. We are consistent with our future land use map designation. We are consistent with the comprehensive plan overall, including the urban form map, and we are consistent we are consistent with the urban form map, and our request, we believe, is reasonable and in the public interest. We are increasing housing opportunities and office and retail opportunities within the downtown core, and we believe that our request for the higher density, higher stories will support the existing transportation facilities. And at this point in time, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Just clarification from the moderator. I do not believe we have anyone signed up to speak on this item.
That is correct.
Okay. So I'd now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Rains?
Thanks, Chair Fox. Couple questions for the applicant. It's a sliver of a site. Do you have any concept plans or thoughts of how this is going to be developed that you can share? If so, how many parking levels are planned? And has there been any discussion with staff about mitigation of or reduction of parking requirements for this case?
So to answer your question, we do not have a specific development plan at this point in time. So I won't be able to tell you, how many parking levels we were have or are intending to have. Most likely, this will be some kind of office or retail use on the ground floor, maybe a floor above that as well, and then residential parking levels above that. But a specific plan at this point in time, I don't have. If there have been any conversations with staff about mitigating parking spaces, I don't believe so at this point in time. That if those conversations are going to happen, that will probably be at the site planning phase.
I'd like to ask staff to address the parking requirements and the changing nature of those in the downtown district.
Sure. I will say, this is Ira Mabel again. The current parking minimum for downtown is 0. That was a text change whose number I forget, but fairly recently. And so they were not required to have any parking from city code.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners? I am not seeing any, so I would like to entertain a motion. At that point, I will offer a motion. Motion to approve case number Z1421 as it is reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically policies LU 4.6, transit-oriented development, LU 4.7, capitalizing on transit access, and LU 4.8, station area land uses. Do I have a second? Commissioner Mann?
A second motion.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table and a second from Commissioner Mann. I will ask Shanitha for a roll call of the votes if there is no further discussion warranted. Seeing none, Ms. Shanitha, can you do a roll call and I will announce the outcome at the end of the vote.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Elder?
Aye.
Chair Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
He is recused.
I'm sorry. That's right. And Commissioner Raines?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Okay, that concludes all of the discussion items on our agenda. Next is approval of the minutes. The minutes were provided in your backup. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes, or if there's any discussion related to edits on the minutes, please do so now. Commissioner Bennett?
I move to approve the minutes. Are we doing both at once or just separately?
We can do both at once.
Okay, I move to approve the minutes from the May 25th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting and the May 27th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Raines?
Second.
Excellent. I will ask for a show of hands to record individual votes, and I will announce the outcome of the votes. So those in favor of approving the minutes? All hands up. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Now on to report of the chairperson. I'd like to welcome our newest member, Adrian Elder, who, if you would like to, Adrian, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the rest of the commission.
Sure. Thank you. I am looking forward to serving with you all. Thanks for the welcome, Commissioner Fox. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of North Carolina. I've had that license for about 12 years. Most of my engineering background or experience has been in residential development area, which gives you exposure to multiple different utilities. And I have spent the last 12 years in a less technical capacity at different infrastructure in different infrastructure companies. I currently work for everyone's favorite electric utility in a management role. And yeah, I look forward to serving with you all. I have lived in Raleigh my entire adult life. I plan to raise my family here, and I'm excited about this opportunity. Thanks.
Welcome, Commissioner Elder. Next, I would like to report staff has completed the drafting of a text change TC 721, which would amend the signage regulations. Without objection, I would like to refer this item to Committee of the Whole. And then, did I see a hand go up? No? Okay. People are stretching. It's about that time. Also, committee assignments. As your new and improved chair, I will be making committee assignments. Those will come out in email. I will likely not shift people too much. We also have a vacancy on the commission right now, which I believe will likely get filled at the next council meeting. So I will leave space on the committees for a new member. If at this point, we do have various subcommittees which may meet in June. I'm going to ask CJ if he's like to tell us about text change committee, and then acknowledging that this will likely be the last time Commissioner Mann speaks to this item, as he is likely getting shifted off of text change.
Thanks, Commissioner Fox. Yes, I spoke to Commissioner Miller, and I think at our next meeting or this meeting, I'd like to nominate her to be the new text change commissioner chair. I will be stepping down and then chairing the committee of the whole. So I appreciate the time that I spent a couple years as text change chair. I would now look forward to doing other things on the commission with the committee of the whole. So thank you, guys.
Excellent, sir. And I believe we have our next text change committee meeting would be on June 15th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
And I can still serve until we get everything situated, but yeah, I'll be stepping down.
Awesome. Well, thank you, new Vice Chair Mann. Transportation Committee, Commissioner Bennett, is there anything to report or announce the next meeting?
I don't have anything to report. We talked about the Blue Ridge Road project. I don't know that we have anything to discuss in a June meeting, so I would say no June Transportation Committee meeting.
All right. And then strategic planning, our chairperson from strategic planning had been Commissioner Winters. She has left the commission to move on to bigger and better things. I'd like to offer Commissioner Lampman to take her place and chair the strategic planning committee. And I'm seeing tacit acceptance of that with a smile and a nod. And if you would like to talk about when your next meeting might be, I'm not remembering calendar-wise when those occur. It might not be until August. Staff might need to step in and help us.
I think the next one is for next week, the 15th. Based on timing, I don't have anything teed up for that conversation. So I think I'd like to start when we get back from our break.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. Next is report of the members. Does anybody have a report they would like to share at this point? Nope, seeing none. Report of the Deputy Planning Director. Mr. Bowers, take it away.
Sure, you have a long form written report in your backup, so I'm just going to highlight a few key things that might be of interest. Most of the items that you reported out on your last report were scheduled for public hearing on June 15th. There were a couple of exceptions. One is Conquest Drive. That was the zoning case you heard that involved flammable material storage and recommended denial. That was deferred for signed conditions. It'll be scheduled at the next meeting. TC 521 Missing Middle was also deferred for scheduling. The council asked for a modification to the ordinance, and what they asked for was that we lower the minimum lot dimensional standards, including lot area for the attached building type to mirror that of single family. So that would mean that any lot that could have a single family dwelling on it could also have a 2-unit dwelling on it. We are making some adjustments to the ordinance that would allow a significantly higher density for the attached dwelling type than other building types. And so we're putting forth 2 options, one that makes that singular change, and one that would adjust the land area per unit for other unit types to come in line with that. And the council will decide which one goes to public hearing on the next meeting on the 14th. So, or 15th. So stay tuned for that. There was items that were approved included the Centennial Campus rezoning. So that was a big one. Rezoning on Avon Ferry Road, as well as Michael J. Smith Lane, which was for a affordable project, were also approved. Z57 Glenwood Avenue at Rimbert was denied. PC had recommended approval on a split vote. Public hearings were closed, and items that were deferred included the East End Market Plan development and the rezoning on Garner Road, both of which had received denial recommendations from the Planning Commission. There's the topic of parking minimums came up today in the context of a downtown rezoning. Council has authorized staff to begin drafting a text change that would remove parking minimums from all districts citywide. So essentially repealing the parking table, and to explore ways to potentially implement either maximums or some sort of performance standard that would kick in if someone was building an oversized parking facility. So staff is going to be working on drafting that. And I believe when it's done, it'll be coming to Planning Commission. And then the last item I wanted to touch on is that staff is bringing forward to Planning Commission something that's been available for council at some time, which is some model motion and consistency statements for both approval and denial. That's something that the council has had available to them for a long time. The Planning Commission has not, and included in my report are drafts of those. They would appear in your backup materials at your very next meeting. So look out for those. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ken. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Commissioner Haber?
Yeah, thanks. Director Bowers reminded me during our retreat, we had talked about 2 different types of policies. I'm trying to go back through my notes to get the actual language that was used, but essentially one of them was a recommendation, one of them was more of a requirement. And we had thrown the idea out of potentially identifying those on the staff reports. I got my notes here. I just can't read my own handwriting, but does anybody else recall that? What's that?
I'm happy to answer the question for you, Commissioner O'Haver. I think what you're referring to is the identification of key policies. And that was something that was discussed during the retreat. So just to give y'all a brief update, staff is going to take the summer break to process all the information that we heard during the retreat and return in August with any enhancements to our materials or staff reports or information in adjustment to those comments.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Travis.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, that concludes this meeting of the Planning Commission. Have a great week.